Morning. Good to see you, Sarah. Nice to see you. Drew, good to see you.
Good morning.
You too. Morning.
Let's focus here. Not do that. Thanks.
Oh, he was giving me love.
That's fine. We can play with the dog later. Awesome. Well, we've got some great stuff to talk about today. It's good to see everybody after the week break. Yeah, we went to Puerto Vallarta and it was an epic weekend for the Microcosm team. We had Zoe got 5th in a pretty competitive international field. Pretty awesome. And then we had another one of our athletes, a newer athlete, Jody. She was 11th in the same race. And and Bijo, he went top 20 in the 50K, which had over 1,000 runners in it. So that was just like totally epic. I had an awesome time just following along with all of our athletes and seeing what they were doing and like just all of the hard work that they've put in and see over the course of the entire year, and just kind of seeing that culminate was really huge. And I think that it was such a special and interesting place to do a race. We tried to train a little bit before the race for Zoe, and we kind of found out pretty quickly that like there isn't like much of a running scene in Puerto Vallarta.
Not a big run hub.
At all. Yeah.
Not a running town.
We took an Uber adventure trying to find some of the trails that were part of the race. And we were really unsuccessful in locating any of those trails. And it turns out we were unsuccessful because
there are not trails.
There's no trails. They basically, as it was described to me by the winner of the 50K, he said he felt like they took a machete and followed a GPX track through the jungle and just hacked down some foliage. And like, that was it. But, no trail on the ground itself, just kind of a tunnel through the jungle. And then, kind of hearing from Zoe and some of our other athletes, like that the race was just really crazy.
It was silly. It was real silly. Would not recommend to anyone. If you're tempted because you saw some cool photos, buyer beware. They were really up on their PR game. Like I mean, going into the race, there just like wasn't a lot of information, which I was actually kind of like at certain points glad for, just because training for Western states, every part of that course is a known factor. In the days leading up to the race, everyone's tweeting about the forecast and saying what that means for your race. Like everything is so dialed in. It really, maybe I actually thought, oh, like this is really great for my like elite competitive brain, but maybe it wasn't, because afterwards I kind of like really struggled to process that DNF. So going into a long race where like there was nothing on Trail Run Project. There's nothing on Gaia GPS. There was nothing even on Strava heat maps, which just meant that like no one had like ever run there before. Lo and behold, it came to pass that no one had ever run there before because there wasn't a trail there, which makes sense in retrospect. But would have been nice to know ahead of time. But on the UTMB website, they had all these just like gorgeous images of people running through agave fields and like next to waterfalls. And I can with 100% confidence say that those are stock images, because nary a waterfall was experienced. You do run next to agave fields, but certainly not through them. But you do win tequila if you're in the top 5. So it was 100% worth it.
Because we drink so much tequila.
We drink a lot of tequila.
We're big into it.
We love our liquor. It's base building season.
Sarcasm. Zoe, I'm just curious. We've talked a lot about the mental side of training over the past couple calls. We've talked a lot about working through setbacks. I'm just going to talk a little bit about you for a second, and this could be uncomfortable, but you definitely struggle coming back from Western States. And I think that journey was not linear at all. In fact, it was pretty extended, as you described to me multiple times. Even going into a couple weeks out from the race, you felt like you still hadn't like been fully over Western States, and that it was just such a hard summer. And I'm curious how you, I don't know, went about compartmentalizing what happened at Western States in order to give yourself a chance to, yeah, stay competitive against some really great female athletes in the 100K. Yeah, what was your process there?
I think for me, even though like mentally, I think I struggled a bit. I mean, there were also some like, I just felt like I was so fit going into States that it felt like every version of Zoe after Western States was like an inferior post Western States Zoe. And that was hard. But I also like, a lot of that was probably in my head. But the good thing was like, regardless of how my brain felt, I showed up every day anyway. I didn't miss a single day of training. I missed like maybe a couple miles, honestly. Like there was one weekend where I was supposed to do like a self-supported 50K. And so like I got up to go do like TJ was out of town. I was going to do the whole thing on my own. And like 18 miles in, I was just, it was shitting snow and I was just slipping in the mud and I wasn't really running. And I was like, you know what? This is like no longer a run. This is like, this, I don't know what this is, but this is not productive training. But other than that, like I got the training done, regardless of like when I felt like, yeah, what's the point? Like if I'm just gonna like DNF, like why work so hard? Why dedicate like so much of my life to this thing? And I was like, well, like, what else are you gonna like, if you don't do this, you'll probably just work more and that's not super healthy. And if you keep just like, leaving the door open for joy will come back in. It's not going to come back in when you want it or expect it, but you got to keep showing up and opening that door. And that's how I felt like all my runs was just like showing up, hoping it would feel good, showing up, hoping it would feel good. And it kind of, I mean, there were definitely some like really great days this summer, but overall it really didn't feel that awesome. But like, you know, I've been through like tough times in running before and I knew that it wouldn't last forever. And I knew that I just had to keep like moving forward and problem solving things, like working with my therapist, making sure my nutrition was good, like trying to set better boundaries at work, doing like all the really small, annoying mental things to kind of help the physical stuff get better. And I think like another mistake I made early on this summer was like after States, I just kind of like, you know, was dealing with some like perception of self stuff. And so I started weight training a lot harder than was productive for my running. And it definitely slowed me down. So I like had to like basically scrap my entire weight training program and then, you know, consult with experts to develop a new one that was going to help me like actually get faster, not make me feel super slow on the trails. And it was like the only reason I'd been doing the really aggressive weight training was to service an emotional need and not to service a physical need. And so that was a really powerful lesson to learn. But like I just did everything I could to like kind of keep rolling the happiness dice. Like maybe this will work, but I just never gave up on that part of it.
Let me just jump in because I really think that you said some important stuff here that athletes can, just process in terms of what's going on in their own individual journeys, but leaving the door open for joy. We have talked about, you know, we're coming to the end of a year here, essentially, and the season for basically every athlete. You know, most of our team has completed or gone for their biggest goals of the year. And we're moving into a base building phase. We're thinking about maybe 2023 goals at this point. And I think it's just so important to remember that, you know, joy is what perpetuates this process. As simple as that sounds, and for all of our like really type A high achievers out there, you know, a lot of you people aren't waiting for the joy factor and maybe are discounting how important that is. And I'll tell you, like in our culture of excellence here at Microcosm and in our house in particular, like it's easy to forget about like that this stuff is supposed to be fun and to just put the work in every day.
I think what reminded me was that it's supposed to be fun was like after my performances were like so unimpressive, I was like, oh, that was never the whole point. Like, yeah, like if you're just going to DNF in the biggest race of your life, you might as well have fun.
Well, exactly.
Like
exactly.
Like what we do, I think we were joking, like when we were in Puerto Vallarta, we were reflecting on TJ's CCC experience. And I remember I was telling him that I remember thinking to myself, like, you can't DNF because this would be such an expensive bad day. So you got to at least make it like worthwhile. Like you got to finish the race because like we can't keep having expensive bad days.
I mean, but that you can, and unfortunately, like that's the sport, right?
But like we were like, this is such a dumb thing to spend like all our time and money on.
All of my money, yeah, thousands of dollars of my money and my sponsors' money, and it's just like, the feeling because you went out and had a tough day at Western States, and it is like there is an emotional toll that exist there afterwards, and it's important to recognize those things. And for me, like the biggest takeaway that I had after CCC, and like the thing that still like keeps me going as I work through some health struggles right now, is like, wow, the CCC build was like the most fun build of like my whole athletic career. Essentially, it's like I never had so much fun. Got to run all these amazing trails, got to train with one of my buddies, and like that was just like the best. And so it's not like you never know what's going to happen on race day, unfortunately. And like the human body can be really fickle, even if we, and the mind too, even if we do all of our due diligence, we put that time in. And so if we forget like that this is about having fun, it's about the journey, it becomes really difficult to zoom out and then stay with the process for long enough to then experience like a great race like Zoe had at Puerto Vallarta and things like that. And so we have to give ourselves these opportunities. We have to consistently zoom out, keep the door for joy open. Like, I really love that. Like, even if you're not experiencing joy, and like, I don't know any athlete. And for some people, honestly, guys, this could last years. We don't want that. But I've heard stories from my peers who have had years of feeling bad, and they just keep the door open, and eventually that breakthrough happens. And like, I don't want that to happen for you guys, but like, there are so many different external factors that can affect how well your training is, how well you race. And so, you got to keep giving yourselves that opportunity. And so you really have to love to do that. Even when it sucks somewhere in your self-conscious, you just kind of have to love that. And I think like for Zoe, as much as she very healthfully externalized some of the struggles after Western States with me, which I fully want to, reiterate, externalize the things that you're going through. It really helps to normalize it and to have somebody to mirror back to you what you're feeling. And so you're not always in your own head. If you keep doing that and keep setting yourself up and just trying, eventually, you reach that point. And I'm not sure if Zoe feels like that race was a breakthrough for her, but like, I actually really do.
I feel like it's not like an on paper breakthrough. I think like on paper, you're like, yeah, that seems about right. Like I scored like just above like where my time wise, I guess, or like placement, like right around where my UTMB index would have predicted. But I think like some of the things I struggled with during Western States, I corrected during that race. So like I improved, and there was noticeable growth, like in competition growth. And I also like my mindset going into Western States, it was such a big race, and there was so much pressure and so much attention on me and the whole thing that like I had to like get into this kind of weird, I wouldn't say it was totally uncomfortable because I am a pretty confident person, but I had to be so confident. Like everyone was asking me, how are you feeling? How are you? Like I had to do interview, and like I had to do this whole thing. And like I had to kind of like, I like, to my coach, I called it my version of like Sasha Fierce, which is Beyonce's like performance alter ego. Like I feel like I had to be in my Sasha Fierce mode like all the time, which like was fine. Like it didn't feel bad. It felt really authentic to me actually. But I felt like I like was like really straining my self-belief muscle, like not really the in training one, but the like the way I was living life self-belief muscle. And going into Puerto Vallarta, I like didn't call on that muscle at all, because it still felt like a little bit overextended. And I was like, I just can't lean on that. I can't be like this, like really like, yeah, like we were talking anyway. But I noticed like all of my behaviors were still in line with being Sasha Fierce. I was still doing strength training every day. The only thing that I didn't do that I wish I didn't really heat train. Like for Western States, I was like, I'm going to heat train every freaking day that I can. For this race, I literally got in a sauna twice, and I was like, you know what? Everyone's imperfect. Like you can't do everything. And that ended up being like totally fine. So like my training was like, I would say 90% dialed for this race, even though it felt like sloppier to me, just because for Western States, it was like 100% perfect. Didn't miss a step up, didn't miss a sauna session, was like driving myself crazy trying to do perfect training. I think that my training still were the behaviors of someone who believed in themselves, even if my head wasn't like, I didn't feel like a walking billboard of self-belief. People were like, what are your goals for this race? And I was like, honestly, like finish. And usually I would say, I just want to finish, and I'd be lying. And I had like a very distinctive goal in mind that I just didn't want to talk about. But for this race, I really wanted to just have fun and finish.
I think it's interesting just to go back a second to talk about your perceptions of perfection going into Western States as compared to how you kind of had to let that go. Not a lot of people, your athletes, our friends, understand like the context of the rest of your life and just how busy and how much you work and how, difficult it is. I mean, I would say, like, to be honest, like we've got nurses and doctors, and then it's just your schedule. And I'm like, Jesus, like this is like real similar. Maybe you're not working, overnight shifts, but I mean, you work like basically every waking moment of the day. And there has to be at some point a moment where you realize like you're not going to be able to execute 100% of your prescribed training all of the time. And so like, maybe you were over indexing a little bit on that at Western States. And so like knowing, and like that didn't really result in the result that you wanted. And then coming out of that, you're like, well, I still have to execute to that same level, even though like the circumstances of my life are even more challenging than they were going into Western States. And like holding that really tightly,
I think it's like such a
hard.
Yeah, it was like such a Zoe lesson to learn, because going into Western States, I was like, if I'm perfect, then I'll be okay. Like I'll be accepted by the community. I'll do well in this race. Like I need to be perfect in order to be accepted and loved. And that's just normal and fine. And so I'm going to be perfect. And I felt like I was pretty darn close to being perfect until the shitstorm of a Western States DNF / like losing a significant portion of my job via the print magazine being cut. And that all happened like within a few weeks of each other. And that was really, really, and also on top of some really intense online harassment. That like really shook me to my core. And I was like, oh, like, and I had been trying to be perfect at work also. Like I was like the first to come in and then the last to leave. And it just like didn't matter. Like I lost the magazine anyway. And like tried to be perfect at Western States. Like I never, like if I had 8 to 10 miles, guess what? I was doing 10, and then I was doing my strength training. Then I was going to the sauna after. Like I was going to be perfect, because I thought being perfect would save me, and it didn't. And so then in this training block, I was like, kind of like had like nihilist vibes of just like being perfect isn't like, I might as well just like not, I don't know, like, maybe the outcome will be good, maybe it won't be, but like, don't try to be as perfect.
Yeah. And again, like we mentioned this a little bit in when we spoke about some of my reflections on my CCC race, trying to find that balance there where you nail everything and you feel good about everything. I consistently change my mind about that. And I try to reiterate that to the athletes. It's, about striving for something, knowing that it's going to be an imperfect process.
Yeah. And I think like something that I've been coming back to a lot is like, I had a training day this summer where a dear friend of mine recommended a loop in the Alpine. And when I went out to explore it, it turned out that the GPX file he had sent me was like all wrong. And I ended up just schwacking around the brush all day and being like so frustrated. and just like feeling like, wow, what a waste of a day. Like I could have been running, I could have been getting fitter. All I was doing was just like wandering around the back country. And then that was like definitely the best preparation for this Mexico race, like all year.
Because basically that's all you did
That's
for
all it
12
did. Like
and a half
this was a
hours.
race that would not care if you were perfect because it was so freaking stupid, which is amazing. And I really needed that. Like, it doesn't matter if you're perfect when you're just like on a mountain of pine needles, or when you're up to your knees in leaves, or when you're walking through a river. Like, being perfect is not helpful in those cases. And that's like such a good reminder that like the jungle does not care if you are perfect at all.
Yeah, you're so right. I want to use that to kind of get the other coaches involved in the conversation and segue over to some of our just our topics for today.
Yeah.
Is that cool? So in the same kind of vein, we've got another really great question around I would say it's a mental performance question. When you're injured or sick for so long, and again, I think in the same vein, when you have months and months where maybe you don't feel like your training is clicking, how do you endure that? How do you stay motivated to come back? And I want to maybe start with Drew on this, and then we can come back to you, Zoe, because I think you probably had some great takeaways there with keeping that joy door open. But yeah, Drew, I'm curious what your take on that is.
Experiencing setbacks is a very normal part of the sport we've chosen to participate in. And so to think in the moment, like this is just my problem, this is all me, like this isn't supposed to happen. It's just kind of setting yourself up for, a tough mental, process or whatever. So, in my experience, when you've experienced a setback, whether that's an injury or a race that didn't go the way you wanted, or an injury or whatever it is, oftentimes when you're kind of coming back from something like that, it helps to just, I know it's impossible kind of, but just, you have to forget everything that you've done, like to just dwell on it and be like, it's not like this didn't go the way it was supposed to go. I worked so hard. I wasted my time. Like all these negative thoughts, you can't do that to yourself. You have to forget about it and you have to look forward. You have to start preparing for just whatever's next. Easiest ways to do that, and again, I feel, is to just 1 week at a time, like 1 7-day brick at a time. We're not looking at 3 months, 6 months down the road when you're thinking of like what that next big thing is. And like, man, I've got a long way to go. I just had to take 3 weeks off because I got COVID and was super sick or whatever the reason is. Who cares? Like 1 week at a time. What can I do this week to better prepare myself for what's to come? What can I control this week to prepare my mind and my body for what's to come? And so that's kind of my thing, like allowing your coach to zoom out and look at the big picture and prepare you accordingly. But what you can do is really put those blinders on, focus on just the immediate future and what you can do to kind of make it work for you that week.
Yeah, 100%. I really love the idea of just controlling the controllables and breaking things down into smaller parts. I know, like for myself right now, I've been struggling a lot with my health, and I have to literally take things one day at a time. And if I have one day that feels good, awesome. I'm going to like run a little bit more. And if I feel a day that I don't feel very good, like I just take the pressure off myself and say, you know what, it's part of the process. That's okay. Let's do a little bit less today. Kylee, you, I think, have like a really unique life experience when it comes to dealing with long-term injury and like consistent injury. What's your take on this?
Well, I don't know if it's unique, I would say, because I do know other people that have had, longer term things that they deal with, but it's interesting. Like I didn't really deal with injury and setback as much when I was running in college and high school. And then it almost kind of all, like, I feel like it was like karma or something. Like when I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, I like got my first like more serious injury with my foot. It was like a freak thing that happened on a trail. And then from there, it's been harder to like climb back. And I think it's really kind of forced me to like look outside of, what running, being obsessed with running and like making it my only identity and trying to kind of like you were saying, like enjoy it more and appreciate the times where things are going really well. And then also like appreciate the times where like I can just go out for a 30-minute run, like go out and I am able to run with no pain or like with no, I've been dealing with some like fatigue issues and stuff lately with hormonal stuff, et cetera. And so like going for a run and feeling like it's not super hard, or even appreciating just like going out for a run. And so, I think a lot of people are like, I have to have this like race goal as like the reason why they're running. And I don't like, I feel like I don't need that. Like, I just, I appreciate running for what it is now, but in my past self, maybe like was very focused on these like goals and it was my identity and that sort of thing. And like, I felt like maybe not a good enough person if I didn't perform in a race or like, didn't have the perfect training block. And so I think that the setbacks have kind of, shifted my perspective a little bit. And that's not to say that it's like not still hard, because I do want to be racing, but at the same time, it does make you like grateful for being able to run. And then kind of like Drew was saying, you kind of have to take it, or you said TJ too, you have to take it like day by day. Like, it's not like, for my athletes, I have an athlete that just got like a pretty serious hip surgery. And it's like, we can't necessarily focus on like 6 months from now and like be stressing out about what if my hip hurts again and like that sort of thing. Like, you kind of have to be more focused on like, what can we do right now, like to try and help you heal and try to help you get back to where you want to be and that sort of thing, versus like 6 months from now, what if my hip's hurting again, and like that can be hard to do though, because you get some anxiety about like, what if I never like can get back there, or what if I never heal properly, et cetera. So I think I wrote, like, I was thinking about this ahead of time. I tried to get some like therapy as well. That's been helpful to just like talk through some of the stuff. I've made sure that I have really good people on my team for like recovery. So I think like throughout this process, like I haven't had really like a lot of perfect training blocks, but David's still my coach. Like, I haven't really been like, oh, I'm injured. So, David, I've been injured for like on and off for the last 5 years. I don't want a coach anymore. Like, I actually want the coach, because even if the training isn't really, that complex to build, it still like gives me something to work on, and like also someone to kind of, be on my team, like cheering me on. So I think that's really important, because I've had some athletes that have gotten injured or like had a setback, and then they just completely give up on running or coaching. And I guess, I just want people to think about like, why are you running? Why are you training? And do you really want to give up? Or, is it just because like, maybe you're feeling down about the process, and maybe we can help you as coaches through that process. And then like other team members too, like, a strength coach or a PT. I'm not trying to like say that anyone needs to work with a dietitian, but like some athletes that have recurring stress fractures, like a dietitian is like a really, really important part of your recovery process if you're getting multiple stress fractures. So something is not right, and it most likely involves your diet. It could be biomechanical too, but there's oftentimes a strong connection to diet. So, you know, looking at all of those team members that are going to help you get back to. So that was a little long-winded, but
No,
super
that
good
was
info.
awesome. And just to kind of point out a couple things that I thought were really excellent there that you mentioned, Kylie. The first one that really stuck out to me was the process of going through these setbacks for you helped you to realize that you were leaning too hard on external motivators and you weren't looking inward enough for motivation, just like the pure like joy of going out and running. And I think that is, as soon as an athlete has like their first big setback, that's something that is often illuminated to them like right away. Like, oh my God, I don't have this goal. I can't work towards this goal. So why would I run? And like, that's incorrect. That's not the correct way to look at things. We have to be like, in order to have success in a sport like running, which has so many inherent impact forces where injury and setback is 100% guaranteed at some point of the process. Like, I don't know any athlete that's been pushing themselves that hasn't had a setback, illness, injury, mental performance setbacks, whatever it is, it's going to happen. So it's really important to recognize that. And then to have that internal motivation to get you through. If you're constantly relying on things externals are outside of our control. We have no control over externals. So if all of our reliance is on externals, we're in a lot of trouble. If you're relying on your friends to get out the door, races to get out the door, what you see on social media to get out the door, or
feeling motivated
to find motivation, all of these things, you're going to have a tough awakening moment at some point where your identity, like you mentioned, Kylie, is kind of going to get shaken up. And that's an important part of the process. That's the part of the process where you really have to lean in. That's when you've got to do the hard work. And when you've done that, you know, you kind of emerge like Kylie has, and you have this new kind of acceptance that I just think is really important. It's a big part of this. I want to actually turn it to Sarah a little bit to talk about acceptance and kind of the role that plays in this.
Yeah, and a lot of things that Kylie and Drew were talking about made me think, just like reiterated some of these things. So, you know, you want the attitudes of acceptance and curiosity as opposed to the attitudes of resistance and expectation. So what that looks like is if we are accepting that we're injured or that we aren't feeling how we want to feel, and we're curious about it, then we say, okay, this is happening. I don't know how long this is going to take. I'm going to take it a day at a time. And, you know, but also like, this is my reality today. So today I don't have this outlet for my stress. So I need to identify another outlet. Because what'll happen is if we're resistant to the fact that we're injured or resistant to the fact that we're going to need some time off, we say, well, I don't need to spend time finding another outlet because this is going to end really quickly anyway. And so I'm just going to, like, you don't spend the time investing in those other parts of your identity or the things that are part of your healing or the things that are going to help you manage your stress because you think that running is going to come back to you right away. And it might, but it might not. So acceptance helps us make, sort of like controlling those controllables. It helps us, or like Kylie was talking about, identifying what could have caused it. You know, like we have to have acceptance in order to think about how to move forward. And the other part in terms of like curiosity versus expectation. So, you know, I know this happens to me, even though I know my pattern and I've done it 100 times. Still, anytime I'm in the recovery process, I will have one good run. And then the next run, I'll be like, it's going to be so awesome because my last run was so awesome. And then that run sucks. And then I have a whole story about that. And if instead I go into that run with some curiosity, like, okay, so yesterday was good. I wonder if my foot's going to hurt today. I wonder how many minutes in until I notice my foot. I wonder if I can get through this run and not notice it at all. That's all curiosity, as opposed to like, I think this is going to be a good run because yesterday was, which is an expectation. So one thing that I noticed that you guys are talking about, well, if I don't have a goal, then, I have no motivation. The thing that I find people doing is being like, well, I'm going to set a goal for 9 months from now, because totally 9 months from now, I'll be back to where I am or where I was, right? And that's, again, that acceptance versus resistance thing. Certainly hope so. Certainly, I believe in that. And I love the idea of that 9-month timeline, but why have that timeline that then doesn't allow us to be curious, because we are putting pressure on ourselves that this run has to be good. So I need to make this progress because I've got that goal now that I've set 9 months from now. And now we're putting a timeline on our recovery process that we've made up because it's what we want and what we're hopeful for, and maybe what other people's has been, but we should just be curious and let that timeline show itself to us, I guess.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. I think it's so important. And I love the distinction between kind of expectations and more of curiosity that you mentioned there. I think that that's really important. That's something actually that I feel like a lot of athletes, tend to misinterpret, right? Like, oh, yesterday felt good. I'm certainly guilty of this a lot. It's like yesterday felt good, so today is going to feel that good or better. And that's, unfortunately, if things were linear, they would work that way, but they're not. The one thing that we have talked about previously in this question is, and this is something that Kristen mentioned a few weeks ago when we talked about dealing with setbacks on another call, but talking about having other hobbies and things that we can lean on during moments where we do have setbacks. And I think that if you've really built out a robust tool set for dealing with challenges, you can often have the perspective that a downtime in your running as a result of injury or illness or whatever is the opportunity to dig into something else that you enjoy at a higher level with more attention, with more time. And so, that's something that I use. That's a technique that I use where I have a lot of other hobbies. My life doesn't revolve fully around running. As much as I enjoy running and coaching and all of that, like I also enjoy other things. And so whenever I have a challenge, it gives me the opportunity to invest my time in other stuff that otherwise I wouldn't necessarily have the time for, because I, am training a lot and working towards goals and, getting out in the mountains, which is something that I really love to do. So I want to reiterate to all of you guys and encourage you, get involved in other things, even if it's just a few minutes a day. For example, I play the guitar and really enjoy music. And so I invest time every single day in that, no matter what. And when I have an injury, I get to invest more time in that, which is great. I also spend a lot of time meditating and really enjoy that space. And so when I'm busy, I have less time for that. But when I'm not running as much, I have more time to explore that. And so those outlets, they give me something, they raise up the joy factor in my life when I'm challenged in, the athletic life part of my identity. And so having those tools, having those hobbies can be really effective. They're not Band-Aids, they're opportunities, they're other outlets of expression. That's how I like to think of it. Could be outlets for stress relief and other things too, which is something that people, you know, they get a lot of stress relief. And
I've been
stuff when
excited to
running.
see Kylee leaning into, you know, her with stuff with her dogs, like doing competitions with Lotzi and showing Ellie. I think that's such a fun way to, I don't know, do something. Like I would assume that like she gets to connect with her competitive side in that process. But also just gets to hang out with dogs, which is the end all be all of most of my life, truly.
I
So,
think that hits, I
go
think that
ahead.
hits on something like when Zoe said that it lets her be in touch with her competitive side. I think like that piece, like what are you missing from running? Because for everybody that's going to be different, right? That's part of your why. So when you're thinking about what it is that you're missing, then that helps you figure out which activities then to turn to. So are you missing the social connection? Then add social stuff to your life. You know, are you missing time in nature? Then figure out how you can get out in nature. So what is it about running that you're missing?
Yeah,
So
it's so
smart.
important.
Yeah.
Yep, love that. I know we kind of touched on this, but I just wanted to see if any of the coaches had a suggestion if you are dealing with kind of some anxiety around the comeback process. If you're feeling like, oh, it's not happening fast enough, you know, I'm missing out. I have the pressure of this upcoming goal, but I'm not getting healthy fast enough. Do any of you guys have, we haven't heard from Kristen yet, some suggestions on just like how to, maybe cope a little bit with that anxiety or the pressure that we might be feeling to get healthy on like a faster timeline?
I would say that there shouldn't be a timeline. Like you shouldn't hold yourself to the calendar when it comes to an injury or a setback of any kind. I think if you're signed up for a race that you've really been looking forward to, like that's great to have it on the calendar and like use that as motivation if you need to. But I think, you know, we talk a lot about holding your training loosely, and this is that time like to do it. So, you know, if you're not progressing as quickly as you think, if your injury is still like popping up every time you try a test run, you know, like it's really easy to freak out. But I think that those are the moments where you can go back to the drawing board and say like, okay, what else can I do? Or how else can I approach this, and just come at it from a place that has like more to do with like gratitude than like, I need this, I want this. If I don't have this, I'm going to not get Instagram likes, or I'm not going to be known as a good runner, or I'm not, you know. I think that those sort of thoughts become toxic and you can spiral. So I think just like holding everything as loosely as you can and not putting so much pressure on yourself to perform when your body is like asking you to chill.
Yeah, we've had a kind of like broad topic of community and volunteerism on this like ongoing Google Doc with our community call information here. And I personally wonder if there is a way that when we give back during challenging times, when we are able to, I don't know, go out and crew a friend when we can't do a race, or go volunteer at an aid station or something like that, that we're able to kind of engage with the running community in a way that like makes us feel like we're involved, like we're working towards a goal that can help maybe ease some of those anxieties. Because we don't want to like take away the running. And this is like why sometimes, like for me, when I can't, like if I have a day where I can't run right now, or where I have to do less, you know, and I start to feel anxiety, like I had to drop a race that I was going to do in 2 weeks from now. And so important to stay flexible. And like, I don't go like on Strava because of the things that Kristen mentioned. Like, it's a little tough for me emotionally to see like my peers training hard and going to like the world championships or whatever. And I'm like stuck at home. Like, am I going to run, you know, this week or not? And so like, I almost think that there are some other things that we can bring into the discussion, like volunteerism, maybe even like maintaining similar routines, but like putting another activity in there instead. Like, for example, like I'll drive the 20 minutes down to our athletic club. I'll stretch for 15 minutes. Then I'll do like heat training instead of, regular training. And then I'll like, I'll try to like do something that's involved, that involves me with the process and keeps me like hyped on training, but doesn't like necessarily like ask me to like go run hard on a body that doesn't want that. Yeah, I would just, Drew, you and Kristen, you guys both had some great notes on community. I'm wondering like what your thoughts are on getting involved, how that might help, just using that as a tool to deal with some of these setbacks. Do either of you guys want to chime in on that a little bit?
I will real quick. I think that volunteerism is incredible. And it doesn't matter if you're injured or not. I mean, getting out there and being a member of your community, not just your run community, but just out there helping others is so incredibly important. Every single person, I'm sure, that's going to watch this video now or watch it later has run a race where they've benefited from the volunteerism of others. And to be able to give that back to others, I mean, is lots of different aspects to this. One, like it gets you in that environment, right? All of us like going to races and you feel the excitement and the buzz in the air. You get that same thing too when you're handing out water at an aid station or clipping chips off of shoes at the finish line or whatever it is. It's fun, it's free. It is, you're giving back. I mean, for me anyway, I forget about all like the worries and stressors in my life when I'm volunteering, just like I would if I were racing. Like you're just in the moment and like it makes you happy. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it, but you gotta do it.
Yeah, I would say the feeling of giving back and helping other people is just like such a rewarding feeling. And when you pair that with being part of something bigger than yourself, like the trail running community or the running community in general, is like, it's pretty profound. Like the people you meet, the impact that you have, and then the impact that other people have on you. Like those are things that you can take into your day-to-day life. Like we talk a lot about how running is a microcosm for life. And I think volunteering is like a really good example of that. There was a situation last weekend at Javelina where I was crewing for a friend and had a really close friend of mine come down from Oregon, and she was crewing for another friend, and we didn't have enough hands when both friends came in at the same time. And just watching the people in the tents around us be like, oh, I can help. And like, we didn't even know these people, so it was really cool. And then talking to other athletes who had just competed overseas and in Canary Islands, and we're like, we're going to work the overnight aid station. And like, we're here to hang out with the community, when like, you're like, God, aren't you tired? But like the community gives them life. And I think that seeing that and being there and sort of like feeling those vibes, like reflecting in every direction, was just like, it was so cool. It was so energizing and just like a good reminder of why we do this insane sport. So it was really cool.
I've got an athlete right now who's about 5 weeks out from a big marathon. She'll be flying, I think she's still going, but flying from the US to New Zealand to run what'll be, I think, like her third or fourth marathon. So fairly new to it, really excited, wanting to run like a marathon pretty much on like every continent kind of thing. And literally like just a freak accident and broke her foot like 5 weeks out from her marathon, and she's in a boot. She can't run. So her and I had a call. We discussed like really trying to get her to just go there, volunteer, be a part of the race experience. Like all the work you've done, it's not wasted. Like you're still gonna you're a better person, from having to do all this, and you get to still go and enjoy your visit and meet new people and have new experiences. You cannot let an injury or sickness or whatever stop you from at least experiencing some of that race culture, that race experience. You have to go, you have to do it.
I'm really excited to always have like a built-in like a week maybe after Western States, or 2 weeks, I had to crew TJ at Silver Rush. And like mentally, I was still just like, the last thing I want to do is just be around ultra runners. Like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to talk to anyone. I'm just like over it. Like, I really want to help TJ succeed, but it did still feel kind of challenging to be so like upfront and personal with the sport that I was like having some feelings about. And lo and behold, I got to spend most of the day with Courtney DeWalter, who was crewing her husband there. And we were just like talking, and I just felt like, I don't know, if there is an ultra running God, she definitely planted Courtney like right in front of me. And like, Courtney was like, yeah, I DNF'd at Green Gate also, man. Like, it sucks. That's the worst aid station to have to hike out of. And like getting to bond with Courtney about like, you know, just like the ups and downs, I think like really, like, it's one thing, like, it just helps to do it with the greatest athlete of all time, probably. Like, I don't know, that was really nice and helpful. And like getting to see how she like was really showing up for her partner helped me better show up for my partner. And like, she was also above and beyond like the most stoked person at the Leadville 50. Like, she was cheering. She was like, she was like, what's your partner's name? What bib number is he? Like, does he need flasks? Like, what can I do? And I'm like, well, okay, like, cool. And she like, when TJ came in, she was literally like running alongside him, trying to like get video of us. Like, just, she wanted to be involved. And I'm like, okay, if that's how Courtney just like gets involved in other people's races, like that's the bar. Like, that's where I need to be for like embracing this journey. And also, you know, she was just like a 1 week out from Hard Rock at that point. So like,
She sets a very high bar.
she sets a very high bar.
My God.
And she stayed like all day at the finish line, like
Yeah.
with, you know, like a cooler of beer, just like cheering people in, like wanting to know how like TJ was doing. She's like, I'm trying to track it. Like, it was awesome. And that's like how you DNF is that way. And that's like how you show up. And that really was helpful for me. Like, cause it was fun. Like, it took something that I was just like the sport, man, like it just is so stupid and it sucks and I hate it a little bit, but I love it. And I have to, like, regardless how I feel about it, I got to show up for TJ because that's, you know, he showed up for me hugely at every day at Western States and also every day leading up to it and all the days after. So, yeah.
I think that it's important just to, recognize like the power of that's inherent in supporting other people. You know, I know the coaches kind of know this because we do this for a living. And every day we're helping people, and there's a lot of really amazing like energy and power in that. But on the other side of that, you know, when you're an athlete who's going through a struggle, you know, getting out and giving your support to another person or feeding off of, you know, some energy from Courtney and seeing her as like a model for like how to be involved in the community and like all of these wonderful things. And, you know, Kristen, you know, a few weeks ago even had like mentioned some setbacks dealing with her dad's health and how that affected her mental health, and like outreach from, you know, her community about that and support. And so like, if you're on like a very narrow individual path, you know, you're a very independent person, which I would describe myself as a very independent person. I feel there is a space for community. Try to embrace that. You know, it's something that I'm constantly working on. I feel like my greatest challenge is like I've built a community of 200 plus athletes. And like, that is actually hard for me. That's not like my superpower. And so like, I've given myself that challenge, but like we get to see that it does raise up everybody. It raises everybody up. And that's like the whole point. And so when you're going through something, you know, hop on the Facebook group, like send a message, you know, come on one of these community calls, like ask a question that we can answer to help like normalize something that you're going through. Because that support goes a long way. And if you're like really struggling, go support somebody. Like, even if that's hard, like I actually really love like crewing, and I enjoy that. So like for me, like when I get to go like crew Zoe and like we should do a whole call on crewing Puerto Vallarta, because it was like one of the most like interesting crewing experiences that I've ever had. But like it does help to keep you involved, even if you can't run, even if like I was out there and I'm like, damn, you know, like oh, I feel like I could probably do really well at this race, but like, it's not my time, and like have to accept that and like give part of yourself to like the race in another way. Like I got to crew Zoe, got to help organize an aid station that was kind of like totally in disarray out there,
Yeah.
So
Mexican aid stations, man.
It was really an interesting process. But I felt like that helped to energize me and to kind of like, provide some more stoke that's going to help take me through these next few weeks and hopefully get back to health. And like, I know that everybody has kind of different versions of what this all feels like, but when we have other people around us, when we insert ourselves in other parts of the community, maybe more localized communities, like what Drew was mentioning, maybe like going out to like a local half marathon and like running an aid station, or like maybe you're not training hard, but you want to pace somebody who's running a 2-hour half marathon or something, or, like Kristen mentioned, going out to Javelina and just like getting stoked and being part of the community, crewing people. It can really help to just lift up your spirits, lift up the energy. And a lot of that is external, but hopefully it feeds the internal, right? Like it feeds your why. It kind of relates back to your values and the things that keep you involved in this process long term, because inevitably we're all going to get injured. We're all going to get sick, and that's just how it goes. We're all going to have tragedy that we have to deal with and all of these things that make training difficult. But the point is that we stick with it. We keep the door to joy open, like Zoe mentioned earlier. And, through that process, we get to discover more about ourselves. We get to learn and we get to become better versions of ourselves and all of that. And I think, that's often hardest when we're going through a struggle, is to remember like these things like make us better. But that does exist there. And the more opportunities, especially that first big setback as a runner, if you can get through that first big one, you're going to have all of this extra like ammunition to help get through the next one. And it's going to be a lot easier. So I would encourage, if you're an athlete who's kind of dealing with something, if it's even been persistent and long-term, like again, refer to our last couple calls, just try to start to develop your tool set, try to normalize and make peace with what you're feeling. And then just bring in those experts, bring in the community, stay engaged in a way that feels good and authentic to you, and just kind of keep that door open. It will help. You will get through it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. I don't want to go on to any other topics today, because I feel like we really like got into this mental, emotional stuff, and it was really awesome.
If you liked this, you might also like therapy.
And I will say that we all recommend it.
We do. Yeah.
It's really helpful. Well, thank you guys. Thank you, coaches. Appreciate all your perspectives. We have looks like a snowy weekend here in Colorado.
Ski season, baby.
We'll see you on the roads. No more trails. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Shut it down.
Bye.